In this video, we're going to add the login endpoint to the accounts controller, and then make sure that we can use the login method and use the return token to access a secured endpoint. Let's go. The very first thing that we're going to do is add a viewModel class for the login post. So right-click on the viewModels folder and add a login viewModel. We need a required string email and a required string password. Next, in the account controller, I'm going to add a private read-only iConfiguration_configuration class level variable, and then inject that into the constructor, and then set _configuration to the passed-in configuration. Next, we need a way to create a token that we can recognize on the server that the client can use to verify their identity in their operations. So I'll create a method private string create token, and we need the app user to be passed into this method. We also need a reference to the auth settings section in the app settings.json file. So iConfiguration section, and this could be nullable. Auth settings equals _configuration.getSection auth settings. Next, we need a JWT security token handler, and I'll name it token handler equals new JWT security token handler. Then we're going to do a byte array security key equals encoding.ascii.getBytes. And then we need auth settings.getSection security key.value. Note the exclamation point here. We don't expect this value to be null. Next, we need to create a list of claims that the user has, and I'll just name it claims. The first claim that we need is the JWT registered claim names.aud for audience. And of course, that lines up to the auth settings.getSection valid audience.value, again with an exclamation point. Next, we need the issuer, which lines up to the valid issuer section .value. We also want the email claim, which lines up to the user.email. Again, this could be nullable, so if that is nullable, we'll pass in an empty string with the null coalesce operator, but I don't expect this to happen. We also need the name, which we will set to the user.fullname. And we need the user ID, which the claim name for that is name ID, and it lines up to the user.id. Next, we need a security token descriptor. Descriptor equals new security token descriptor. And we'll set the subject of that to new claims identity and then pass in claims. Expires will be datetime.utcnow.addDays1. And the signing credentials will be new signing credentials. And for that, we need to pass in a new symmetric security key, and security algorithms.hmac-SHA-256. Next, we need to get a token. So security token equals token handler.create token, and then pass in descriptor. And finally, we can return token handler.write token. This will give us everything that we need to validate identities. So let's add the login method. HTTP post, login, and this corresponds to API/accounts/login. And it's going to be a public async task, action result, auth response view model, login, and we accept a login view model. First, if the model state isn't valid, we'll return a bad request and pass back model state. We then need to get a reference to the user, and this could be nullable. App user equals await _user manager.find by email async viewmodel.email. And here's your friendly reminder to like and subscribe. We post new videos often for software developers, software engineers, and software architects. Thanks. If the user is null, so we'll return an unauthorized response and a new auth response view model. Result is false, and the message is invalid username and password combination, and the token is empty. Of course, we didn't check the password yet, but if the user wasn't found, we don't want to specify the difference between if they didn't supply a correct username or username and password. Bool result equals await underscore user manager dot check password async, pass in the user, and the view model dot password. If the result is false, we will return an unauthorized, and the contents of this are exactly as they were before. Again, not to allow the user to distinguish between an invalid user and an invalid user and password combination. So at this point, if the user is found and the password checks out, we know we've got a valid login. String token equals create token and pass in the user. And we can return an OK at this point. New auth response view model, token equals token, result equals true, and message equals login successful. This message can be anything you want, it's not important. And save this. And at this point, we should be good. The weather forecast controller has this get weather forecast endpoint. And as you can see right now, it's not secured. We'll look at that inside of Swagger just to make sure that you see the weather forecast coming back since it's not secured. And then when we turn on security, that get weather forecast will no longer work. So let's launch the app so we can do our login test. So you can see the weather forecasts are actually coming back from the endpoint. And in the API accounts login, let's do our test. And if you use the same email and password that I used, it is test@test.com for the email. And the password is capital TE $T1234. This may take a few minutes to run depending on your system. And you can see that we do have a token here. The result's true, login successful. Everything seems to work fine. Let's copy the contents of that token, just the string value, and head over to JWT.io in your browser. And if you paste this into the encoded side, on the decoded side, you can see that we have our audience, the issuer, the email, the name ID, everything that we added for the claims is listed here. The MBF, expired, and IAT are values that's supplied by the token descriptor. They can be ignored, but just know it's the expiration. Now let's close down the browser and go back to the weather forecast. And all we have to do is add the authorized attribute on the getWeatherForecast method. Now when the weather forecast loads, you can see no data is being returned. And let's go back to our login and log in again with the same values. Test@test.com and capital TE $T1234. And we want to copy the token that was returned from the login and go down to the weather forecast. And if you try it out and just execute it, you can see that we get a response of 401, which is unauthorized. On the weather forecast endpoint, if you click on the little lock up here by the chevron, this will pop up a modal so we can add our authentication details. In the value text box, type in bearer space and then paste in the token. And then click the authorize method and then close out that modal. Now when we execute, you can see we are getting a weather forecast back. In the next video, we are going to add the user interfaces for register and log in. Until next time, happy coding.